All right, so this is going to be an overview of the wiring kit for the electronic speedometer conversion that we sell on BoxyJeep.com. So it's actually really straightforward. We include this wiring diagram with all of our orders. But basically it's 3 wires that go from the back of the harness, the back of the cluster, all the way down to the actual speedometer sensor itself. So the wiring schematic, basically you have 2 wires that are for ignition power, so you could see where those connect on the back of the cluster. You have 1 wire which is white, which is the actual speedometer signal, and then you have 2 black wires which are ground, which connect here. So those join together, and then you have 3 for the remainder of the distance of the harness. At the very end of the harness, you have this, I think it's a Delphi connector, but basically looks like this. It has square terminals. And then you have a firewall grommet so that you can pass it through your firewall, seal it up properly. And then you have a 3-pin Deutsch connector. So if you haven't worked with Deutsch connectors before, definitely need a decent crimping tool. And you know, there's different types of connectors here. So these barrels go in, I guess this would be considered the male connector. And then the pins, those go in the female connector. And then there's two of these pieces that kind of lock things together. We also include the five ring terminals that connect to the back of the gauge cluster itself, and that's pretty much everything that you need for the wiring. So I'm going to get this finished up, show you some more details of what it looks like, and yeah, hopefully it makes it easy for you when you're converting your Renix cable-driven speedometer to an electronic speedometer from a 91 to 96 gauge cluster. All right, so we've got our Deutsch connector terminals crimped on. We've also put on our heat shrink. Obviously we haven't shrunk it yet, and we got to make sure that the grommet for the firewall is also there. As far as which wires go where, it actually doesn't matter as long as both ends of the connector are lined up the same. So obviously orange to orange, black to black, white to white. So now we'll go ahead and get this terminal set up in the terminal setup in the connector, and then we'll go from there. Yeah, so we can see we got all of the pins lined up, and then we want to take this piece right here and basically just goes in like so, clips in, and now you have the male connector ready to go. The rubber seal goes in the back, and that's how you put together a Deutsch connector. Feel free to look on YouTube. There's also some great videos that you can find there around how to do that. Pretty straightforward. And then what we'll do now that we have everything together is we will basically melt the heat shrink using a heat gun, and then this part of the harness will be done. The other thing too I'll mention is we use really high quality split loom in our harness. A lot of split loom out there, if you start to heat it up, it will melt. Ours does not melt, it's high temp, holds up really well. The other thing too is you want to make sure you keep some of the wire visible. Otherwise you're not going to be able to service the connector in case you need to remove the terminals or check something or test something. So make sure you don't put the heat shrink all the way up to the back of the connector. Leave a little bit of space there. All right, so for the next part of the harness, what you're going to want to do is create basically the portion that connects to the back of the cluster. So you want to use a butt connector and kind of have this 1 to 2 fan out for the ground and the ignition power. So use the butt connector there, crimp it down, make sure you use a heat gun to shrink that down, and then you want to put the 3mm ring terminals, 1 on the white wire for the signal, and then 2 on the ignition and ground. That'll be going to the back of the cluster. So you can see here, based on the wiring diagram and where that connects to the back of the cluster. Now that that's done, we're going to terminate the other end of these wires with the female Deutsch connector. Just make sure that it lines up properly with the pinout that you did on the other end. Doesn't matter which, just make sure it matches what you have on the male connector. All right, so this Deutsch connector is all done. You can see that it matches up with the wiring for the other part of the harness. And now what we'll do is just throw on some heat shrink and wire loom, and this harness is done. All right, and there we go. The wiring harness is all ready to go. This will plug into the sensor. You've got the loom, you've got the grommet to go through the firewall, you've got the 3-pin Deutsch connector, and then we have the ring terminals that will connect to the back of the cluster based on the diagram that's included. So it should be pretty quick. Just make sure you have a good set of terminal crimpers, scissors, wire strippers, and then obviously a heat gun, and you should be all set.